Welcome to the Galileo Ventures podcast and the final episode for season 2. Round of applause for that one. I'm James with our co-hosts Hugh and Julia. We are 3 VCs serving up insider insights and hot takes on the latest technology news you won't find anywhere else. A quick shout out to our podcast sponsor, Herbert Smith Freehills, one of the world's leading law firms. HSF regularly represents top founders and investors with deep expertise across the startup lifecycle. If you're interested, head to galileo.lol/HSF. And a big thanks for HSF for being our first ever podcast sponsor and this whole season, because without them, this season would have been possible. Importantly, if you are listening and you would like to sponsor season 3, please reach out. I thought before we dive into some news, I wanted to take a quick look back down memory lane. For the fans that follow us, the millions of fans that follow us.
Millions of fans.
Correct. Last month, Relevance AI announced their Australian 37 million Series B led by Bessemer Ventures. It's the largest AI agent funding round in Australia, period. I mean, agents are pretty new.
AI agent funding round. You're picking from a pretty small audience there.
Correct. But still, I chucked it into deep research, and for enterprise agents, it's the 9th largest round globally when it was announced last month. At Galileo, the important part is we were the first VC in the pre-seed round, and it's been quite a journey since we invested back in 2020. If you're interested, we'll put the show notes in for a lovely sort of retro we did on the blog. But I wanted to throw over to you, Jules, because I know you've been dying to ask us some questions about this. What are your questions about our journey with Relevance today?
So I think everybody just wants to know, did you know from the beginning?
Did we know? Yes, we did.
Every VC would love to say yes about that. But I mean, let's remember that way back when, like, the company was originally a vector search, not quite database, but almost database. Like, they were going down the pointy end of vector search. Admittedly, like, with the insight, I guess, of seeing that, the use cases and everything else of vector search were exploding because of the sort of, I guess, emerging AI frontier. So this is actually realistically, effectively a pivot. You'd call it a pivot probably, because they weren't going out to build AI tooling early on, or specifically AI tooling that, end businesses would use. They were much more broad, I guess, or kind of broad, but also quite specific, doing things like, semantic search and things like that using vector databases. And so it's definitely a big change from where it was. It definitely wasn't at that time obvious that, ChatGPT would be the thing that it became.
But having said that, I would put the caveat to that is we saw the potential of what vector databases could do with any type of qualitative data. And really, if you think about it, vector databases underpin LLMs and a lot of the AI applications today. And I think we just have a terminology of agents now.
Okay, so what about them? What about their founder, USB that made you go, this is different and this is going to go somewhere?
It's a good question. I think for me, it is their ability to look around the corner. So I still remember the day, Daniel Vasilev, one of the co-founders, may not remember this, but he called me and I think I've stumbled upon something really interesting. And this is kind of the very early machinations of using vector databases to basically get qualitative, any sort of data like text, and then pushing out an amazing output without having to touch the data. And it was really fascinating. And so the simple answer is both the co-founders are like classic founder tinkerers and builders, and they're very good engineers, and they think about the future a lot, and they've got amazing background in some of the stuff that they've built to date when they were really young. And we've been following their progress for a while. So when it came to launching their first, AI company that's like potentially a huge product that could be globally applicable and could scale and stuff, it was a no-brainer for us, even though it was very early in the business and they weren't really sure what the application would be.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I would say at a very simple level to also answer your question there, Jules. Very simple level, like Daniel and Jackie's other early co-founder, now joined by another Daniel. I think for a while they had 3 Daniels or 4 Daniels on the team. But Dan and Jackie were both, they both had a huge amount of hustle. That team hustled. Crazy.
Yeah.
And you had no question at all, would these two, sort of wade through, treacle in order to turn this business into a thing? Never a question.
So What do you think this means, like for Australia, like overall? What do you think this means in terms of what else, what comes next, especially now with AWS coming in and saying, hey, we're going to really invest in your data infrastructure for AI. What do you think it means overall?
I think it's a good question. I mean, the thing I would say is it shows Australia companies can compete at a global level, especially in the application layer stuff. So I think application layer is where we've seen some early successes from some of the big companies, the unicorns in Australia that have already deployed. Like Canva's done an amazing job, like integrating AI into their product, and that's led to a huge amount of growth for them. But if you kind of push aside the established products, which they are now, for Relevance, really the first kind of breakout, I would say, at that kind of next phase of what comes after chatbots and LLMs, if that makes sense, which is AI agents, which is what everyone is. Everything's now an AI agent, which is kind of the joke internally. So yeah, I think it's a strong signal for that, but it's also, I think, a very strong signal for the talent that we're starting to see in the application layer. So it's super exciting for us as we kind of look for more AI founders to invest in.
Okay, so give us like the details. So you guys found them early, and then I mean, there's others that say they found them early too.
I
You
mean,
know?
yeah, there's always people that rewrite history after the fact, Jules. I like there's still a photo. We're not the sort of type who would post this on LinkedIn because we're not quite that sort of special about ourselves.
We need a photo.
But there is a photo of us the day that the team signed their Series A term sheet, standing by a pool on Founder Retreat in Byron Bay, I believe it was. We're in
First
Byron
round.
Bay, whole group of founders when they closed their Series A, led by Insight Partners. And it's a photo of us with Dan and Jackie standing next to the pool. I think it's shorts. It's definitely not. It's the sort of photo that you probably look back on and you're like, oh my God, we probably should have framed that a little bit better. But were we the type of team that would post those sort of photos? It'd be everywhere all over LinkedIn, showing how we were so early with the team. But as a very humble venture capital fund, unlike every other venture capital fund in existence and angel investor and literally everyone in the ecosystem, we of course have not plastered that photo there. Also, because it probably doesn't make us look that good in the sense of, we be more
No.
aesthetically pleasing.
No, it was never meant to be shared, that photo anyway. It was
No,
an
correct.
internal
It was more of an internal photo for, when they
Yeah.
when they do their victory laps and they become professional speakers
that
in their
was the
50s.
seed round. That was the seed round. We took that photo. That was when Insight joined. So Insight invested super early. Insight Partners.
So how did
and we
they
s-
how did they manage to do that? I mean, Insights in New York. How did that come
Great
together?
question, Jules.
It's a good question. It's a combination of things. So we helped with that first round. So we became the VC on the ground. Insight was the earliest they've ever invested in a company outside the US in their history. Was Relevance AI. Fun fact. They were very nervous, but like equally they could see where AI was heading, and so they had a very strong thesis in being early in AI. And to this day, they still invest early in AI infrastructure. It's changed so much since they come in then, but like already they had a very strong view on what would be super exciting, and they love the team, and they still do, obviously. And so they've been supporters ever since. And so we kicked off the relationship with them, and it's been great as well. But there's still more miles to go, as the Americans might say. There's many more miles to go. They're early in their journey. So yeah, it's going to be interesting what the next 12 months lay out.
Is there like a special like founder formula that you think works? I mean, other than hustle, everybody like.
The part that they had, and the part that I think, what is the thing that I would talk about to to a founder who wants to do something in AI? It's like they had their ear to the ground. They were really early in listening to going, oh, like people really want to build these kind of, and this is like almost before LangChain existed, right? People want to be able to build these workflows. And what about, the early part of the product was like, the thesis was, product managers should be able to build complex AI workflows like, a la, Zapier or N8N and things like that now. They should be able to build complex workflows without involving engineering, right? And that was kind of the early part of the product that then sort of, pivot, like, again, turned into the product where it is now. But you could see that the team was really keeping a very, very close ear to the ground as to what was going on in the market, what people were looking for, what were the things that technical people were doing that non-business users wanted to be able to have, an easy GUI to be able to actually configure and, productionize and everything else. And I think that was really what they were very successful in, was being able to be on top of those trends.
Yeah, I would add to that just to say they have a very strong thesis around what it means to be like a non-technical expert.
Yeah.
And I've always found that one of the most interesting theses of how they've always thought about the product. Because I think if you look at the current wave, a lot of people are building either for consumer like ChatGPT or just developers like Cursor, and they're all very successful, obviously. But when it comes to experts where they understand the topic area, that's where you get a lot of value using AI. Because if you think about it, rigid deterministic software, you had to have a very defined product user in mind.
Yeah.
Whereas now it generalizes. And so they have this horizontal non-technical expert thesis, which has led them down a very different path now.
So, James, tell us about your. You'd written these LP notes and written a proposal on what Australia should do. Everyone loves a good policy proposal in Australia. What should Australia do to become a major AI player, given that neither party really brought any AI policy towards the election? Everything was obviously cost of living, housing, safety, the classic things you tick off in a government. And so walk us through what the policy was and, what kind of the core parts of it were.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, to summarize, we put out a LP notes for our investors, and then that became like a policy proposal blog post that I shared out, and that's been picked up by quite a few people, advocates in the sector, and it's been really great because I've had some fantastic conversations with various people who have been, advising the federal ministers at all levels. Essentially, the quick summary for those who haven't read it is that I put a number to how much money we should be throwing at AI, and that number is 5 billion, and I split it into 5 pillars. And rather than try and work out an uneven split, I just said 5 billion into 5 pillars, 1 billion each into each pillar. The 5 pillars really quickly are core research and sovereign LLM capability. So this idea that we don't actually have a sovereign LLM is kind of incredible to me.
Incredible. I mean, there's not a lot of countries that probably really do have much in terms of a sovereign LLM
Oh,
capability and desire. I mean, there are some. There are some.
Canada, UK, Italy, America, obviously China. When it comes to OECD countries where you have the depth of AI research that we do, we're in the top 4, then all of them have it except us. So I find that very, very interesting. And then obviously AI core. So one is core research. The second one is industry capability, which is kind of like the applied layer, which is obviously where we invest in. And I'd love to see $1 billion into that. And then a third is establishing a semiconductor industry, which is the contentious part. But the fact that we have not a single thing here made in any way, I think there's a lot of work we could do there. So we're not reliant on just shipping in chips from somewhere else. And then the fourth is an incentive for AI model building companies. Like, why doesn't OpenAI open an office in Sydney? Why do they open one in London? Why do they open one in Singapore?
We haven't given
or
any
any
incentives.
LLM
Isn't that the
model
usual government answer?
Correct. And then the fifth one is the classic sort of attracting and retaining and retraining AI talent, right? Which is kind of like what everyone's talking about in some ways. But we've already got some natural advantages, and so that was the idea, was to put it out there and see what people said.
So what'd you get back?
And what did they say? Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it was very interesting. So I have spoken with ministers, I have spoken with researchers, I have spoken with industry, and all these segments have made input into the government in various ways. Unfortunately, the net of it has been, up until now, the government doesn't want to do anything and has not known what to do, and has been dragging its feet. And so the current government has not had a priority to do anything around AI, unfortunately. They've been doing a lot of what I'd call market research and seeing what everyone else does, I think. And I think it's been a very passive, non-reactive response.
I mean, from a government answer, like, nothing becomes a priority until there's a minister, right? And there isn't really, I guess you could say it falls under science and innovation, but there isn't really a clear answer in a way that other governments have had this approach. Like you have the US style of the AI SAR, right? But typically in government, until there's like actually a body that looks at, whether it's an agency, whether it's a minister, whatever it might be, nothing really happens, right? And I agree with you that like the current government doesn't seem to have shown any interest in doing that. And, fair enough. I'm sure that they're getting more complaints from the average voter about cost of living and housing crisis and all that kind of stuff. I can believe that the average voter doesn't see it as a priority, but that's again because one of the challenges with the sort of median voter is that often the median voter is much more short-term mindset oriented than otherwise, right? And so we're really, how do we sort of create the catalyst as an industry to help government realize, actually, we need to be thinking about this long-term aspect. It's not just quantum.
I think
that was the point of kind of having your LP notes, right? It was like, hey, LPs that are investing and looking at this space, like chronically, and continually. Didn't you have an idea of what we need to have done on the government side so you can like
Well,
help like
I think,
facilitate that conversation? Like
yeah,
it's
I
not
think
industry only problem, right?
that's right, and I think it's also, but it's also in Australia we have a really bad job of providing the voice of, well, what I'll call the founder slash builder like segment. So if you think about the voices today, it's primarily Microsoft and Amazon who make a lot of noise in whatever they want to see regulation. It's a whole bunch of safety researchers, AI safety researchers, which anyone that knows me knows that I think all that stuff is way overblown. I think it's jumping the gun. And I think it's gotten way too much airtime, which has been negative. And when it comes to actually like stuff that will lift productivity, like who's building the next big, in the article, like we talk about, Sequoia has the prediction there'll be $10 trillion AI companies created in the next 10 years. And I go, well, how many will be created in Australia? And who are they? And they're going to move the deal. And we can't just be talking to big tech, And so I think the current government, I'm not too sure, has any voices of entrepreneurs and people who are backing these entrepreneurs. And so that was part of the catalyst. But I would say, back to your point, Hugh, about the body, I'm not too sure. Like the whole point of the Ministry of Industry, the Minister for Industry, which was recently replaced upon the last, federal election, that's kind of their job, is to figure out what to do in that space.
In theory, but I mean, a lot of that, to put it on to put it in a sort of innovation context, a lot of that is sustaining innovation, not disruptive innovation, right? Like it's kind of doing.
No, that's
the
not
same
true at
thing.
all. That's not true at all. They have made a point to pick winners and invest. Quantum,
investment's a different story though.
National Reconstruction Fund, like they've literally, Labor government's made it. But when it comes to AI, they've made a point not to do that, which I've always thought was very interesting. Having said that, the current treasurer made a point to mention AI in his first speech on the day after the election they won, right? And I think that's because they've realized that the big dirty word in Australia no one wants to talk about. Everyone will talk about housing and the cost of living, which are, obviously very important, is productivity, and we have none of it. It's on the decline, and I think it's kind of crazy that we aren't looking at AI as potential, like AI applications as a potential answer to some of these thorny questions. And so that's where I think the treasurer is also coming into it now. But we'll see. We're hoping to lend our voice. We want to organize a roundtable, which we've had a lot of people come back and said they'd love to be part of. And this is an ongoing thing we have now engaged with. So we'll see where this thread lands. And hopefully we might make a positive impact on AI policy. Wouldn't that be exciting?
It'd be great. No, I think it's a very forward-looking policy, and that's where I think it's, the challenge, I think, like I said, as a sector, is to make it interesting and important enough to actually think about a long-term solution. Like that's a hard argument.
Do you know the number one thing I got back from...
Look at the Daily Telegraph, what is the front of the Daily Telegraph? And the answer is cost of living. Do you
know the number one positive feedback I got that was uniform across people that were informed was that the number one thing they said was, I'm so glad you put a number to this.
Yeah.
No one put a number to it. And I thought,
everyone else just sort of says, we need to actually go and do this.
Yeah. And I was like, $5 billion, it's not in the grand scheme of things. It's really not much, especially if we're not going to buy these nuclear subs. We'll have some spare change, that'd be lovely.
Subs now.
Anyway, without going in the rabbit hole, my original thought experiment was like, what if we spent the nuclear sub money, the AUKUS deal, which, for those who are listening, which is like
but no government is going to take away money from defense, again.
I know, but the thought experiment was, what if we spent $230 billion on AI?
Bigger defense, like in the end.
No, but AI isn't a vote winner because the boomers don't understand it. They can barely understand how to, turn their phone off silent.
Wow.
Correct. I mean, there's a whole nother podcast in why does Australia voters hate innovation with a passion.
Will voice-controlled AI assistants finally become good when the boomers die off, and then it's the people, in their 40s who actually understand how to talk to a box?
I don't know.
Is that going to finally have conversational interfaces take off? All of these, personality pins and everything else are too early. We need to wait until aged care facilities are full of people who actually talk to an Alexa.
It's the same kind of thing with online booking, right? It was like nobody
Correct.
wanted to online book restaurants to save your life, right?
Until enough boomers died off.
And then it was just like open table, and it was the momentum. And then it was just like, okay, fine. we'll acquiesce and we'll just fucking go with it, right?
But I think a lot of that was actually that the people, the youth, the youth got old enough to have actual disposable income, and they became the people who booked restaurants, because you know what, mum doesn't book a restaurant for you anymore, because mum's still stuck on a Nokia 5110 playing Snake version 1 RIP, but like mum is still stuck on that. She can't work out how to use an online booking system, but also it's much faster for me to do that than her to try and work out a phone call and they're not open until 4:00 today, and like my mother was actually quite technically competent before. I know she's a listener of the podcast, so I got to be careful what I say. Hypothetical mother, before I really get in too much trouble. But I think it was like when people get old enough, like it's that generational shift that then means that those things become much more useful. And you can be too early on that. And again, like you look at the voice assistants. The theory of voice assistants was what happens when you start losing your vision and everything else, and like you can just say, "Hey Alexa."
I think you're touching on a much broader product question here, which is, given the choice, is it better to talk to someone, an AI agent or what have you, or use a picking modal for booking your restaurant? And I think pretty much almost always people would lean to, I'd prefer just to talk to someone.
Yeah, I see. I'd rather a booking modal, but I'm a little bit. I know I'm a little bit unique in this, in the same way that I hate video and I like to read things at length instead.
But it's market trends. Eventually, like the greatest thing is like we now kind of have this like internet monoculture that's been created, right? So everybody.
Is that a great thing, having an internet monoculture?
Well, everybody uses the same products everywhere, and eventually, like we all.
I don't think that's true.
I don't think that's true at all. I don't think that's true, Jules. Even just in the context of, I look at me and the people who are roughly my, like similarly my age, right? And it's interesting because I still reach for Google search first, and it's almost like it's the sign that you're a boomer, is that you go to Google search first for a problem. A friend recently had to find a chimney sweep, right? A chimney sweep in the year of our Lord 2025. A chimney sweep.
Straw poll between the three of us. If you think about all searches you do, what percentage of those searches are now LLM first versus Google first?
2%.
2%? What about you, Jules?
Oh, but I'm skewed way farther. I mean,
doesn't matter.
Yeah, what's the percentage?
If you had to guess.
60-70%.
So if yours is ChatGPT, LLM.
No, it'll be like a ChatGPT. It'll be a Gemini. It'll be,
So yours is 60%. 60% AI first. What are you, James?
Yeah, interesting. I would have a guess. For me, it's probably 30-40% of my searches are now gone straight to OpenAI.
I wonder how much of that, though, is because Jules has kids. Because again, kids do drag you forward in technology much faster, because you're like like it's in the house. You need to understand it, because you're suddenly like, oh, my child's talking to.
Yeah, but it's your online shopping aspect, right? So if you're like mum of household, you're doing majority of shopping. Unfortunately, it's still kind of that way. And then on top of it, like you're researching and booking simultaneously. So you're just kind of like, okay, what's the best for tennis? Okay, great. Best tennis racket. Okay.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because, like I said, like a friend of mine was looking for a chimney sweep, right? Fucking chimney sweep, whatever. Was looking for a chimney sweep, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I found the chimney sweep on ChatGPT." What?
Yeah.
Why did you not put it in Google? Chimney sweep Melbourne. God, chimney sweep Melbourne. What a search.
But of course because you can put like your parameters of what you want. But
you're just getting the same crap you're going to get from Google SEO anyway.
Yeah, but it's cute.
But the thing that I find
but the caveat is, it tells you, for example, let's just take the tennis racket thing, okay? So Father's Day came. I was like, all right, when am I going to get money? I'm like, all right, I'll get tennis lessons, tennis racket, blah, what's the best tennis racket? And it gives you all, if you're, tall, above 6 foot, this is your best
gives
racket.
You the description.
You're a medium player. Do you like to serve? Are you playing doubles? Like, it gives you all of these caveats of if this, then that. And so you don't have to like multi-search.
See, intellectually, I like to multi-search. Like, I like the learning process, I think, too much is the problem. Yeah. And also, I know how much of the internet is full of like AI SEO slop. Or generic SEO slop that now is increasingly AI SEO slop.
Yeah, but I would trust an LLM to be able to see past that.
I don't trust an LLM at all to see past that.
No, I think so.
The link is not in the conversation here, so we're not there yet.
So,
right?
Well, it is now. So as you can see with ChatGPT, Gemini, you're now adding links to the articles, which is a very good segue to our next topic, which is AI search. In particular, for our listeners, the concept of Google Zero. And so let me just introduce the concept first, and then we can talk about it. So LLMs now help you surface search results faster, right? As we can now describe, although here you don't use it that much, but you'll probably use it more.
I use it a little bit. I just don't use
a
it
bit,
that
right?
much.
And so, according to WSJ in an article, they've said Google AI summaries, which is admittedly still Google, but AI summaries, has already impacted their traffic. And then if you kind of look at SEMrush, which is a blog, on SEO and stuff like that, they're claiming, and this is probably very sensational, right, to get people to read their blog, AI search visitors will surpass traditional search visitors by 2028. And what that means is when you write a query into LLM, you get a link, and then you go to that link, right? And so in a recent interview, a CEO of a big American company called Dotdash Meredith, which is essentially a big media company in the US, for those that don't know it, they talked about how in their working groups, they have a concept of Google Zero, which is what happens if Google stops sending you traffic altogether. And they think it's not a doomsday plan. They said it's a working scenario. I find it really interesting. So on anecdotal information that I have from some very good sources, there is already a very strong signal about OpenAI pulling away, Google search information.
We see it in Scared. Like we see it within our own
right?
business.
And I'm hearing this from other founders and other builders and other product owners. They're going, you guys. So how are you guys seeing it in Scared out of interest?
I mean, we've just seen the big shift, I guess, from it's a noticeable. I mean, it's still early, I guess, but you can see it probably maps the global side of seeing ex-Google organic derived search traffic decreasing probably 20-30%, I think is the global number year over year, and a lot of that being replaced by ChatGPT driven traffic. So we can now see and we can attribute, I guess, to sign up the customers that have come to us through ChatGPT, and it's actually quite interesting seeing there's a report that we pull from our web analytics, looking at which pages, again, primarily blog pages, it is much like organic SEO, which blog pages are actually subsequently, or even feature pages, are the landing page destination from your ChatGPT or whatever conversation. And that then is that interesting question of, okay, well, what do we actually do about that? Is that actually because, and one of the questions I've asked the team is is it actually because a lot of these are old blog posts? And part of the problem here is when it comes to the web search side, yeah, sure, okay, there's an argument that all the SEO people are saying, oh, you should optimize the website for Bing for once because, a lot of these things use the Bing API. No, really, a lot of them do use the Bing API for the web search part.
They do.
Yeah.
And no one's obviously looked really much about how you optimize your website for Bing. But putting all that aside, it's interesting seeing the change in which that research behavior has shifted. And this is where I think the thing that is possibly different is a lot of the time, you look at even some of the LLM reporting tools, the LLM SEO or GEO, whatever the hell, they haven't worked out what the acronym's going to be yet. But a lot of the reporting tools will then give you an analysis of which web posts are frequently cited in certain LLM results.
Yeah.
And it is, to be fair, it pretty much maps to Google one-to-one a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily changed that much.
Well,
but the source has changed, right? And the difference, I think, is that we know that with Google, what happens in the Google sort of SEO world, I guess, is that every time they do an update, we work out what's changed, everything else. Whereas LLMs will move at a much faster pace.
I feel like it's a deeper understanding of the question. It's not so, basic and limited, and it can actually understand the depth of the question, if that makes sense. So, you have a bit more information than you would have had previously.
Well, I think it's interesting that Hugh is saying. I think, correct me if I'm wrong. Your summary of what you're saying is you are getting more AI search, but the AI search is mapping to what's already high on Google search.
What we saw previously.
And
it's typically similar posts are popular, I guess, with the AI destination pages to the posts that were popular in the Google search pages.
So I think the question really becomes, what becomes popular when LLMs are filtering the search results before the human sees it? And this goes back to my point, which is I think it's going to get far more nuanced. I think when you put parameters into an LLM search, it knows what to do and look for, right? It doesn't necessarily just give you the top 10 things in blah category.
Yeah, but it's not. But I think it's also not yet very good at. And one of the interesting threads I saw, and I won't be able to find it again because it's impossible to find anything on Twitter these days once you've seen it. But one of the interesting threads I saw was from someone who was writing about a post about how interesting it was that the little Google AI snippet answer, thing, essentially had invented like a motorcycle that didn't exist, right? And they clicked a little thing that said, view source of where this is from, blah blah blah, and it was from essentially a AI slop YouTube channel, right? And the Google search AI, blah blah blah, and I think they said that they had saw the same thing, and they sort of ran the same search through ChatGPT. Would find these YouTube channels that anyone who with an idea of the space of would know that the Yamaha no longer makes the Yamaha blah 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 whatever motorcycle, but because there's this YouTube channel that's generated all this AI slop of this like brand new motorcycle released by Yamaha, that anyone in the sector would be like, this is clearly obviously rubbish, but the AI doesn't know that. And so it was confidently saying, "Oh, look, here's the engine that's been released recently, and here's the thing, and here's the specs of the engine and all that kind of stuff." Off the back of this YouTube video that was clearly false.
I mean, I think the question I really have, right, because you can argue LLM effectiveness in search. I think it's easy to assume it'll get better. LLMs will get much better at searching the web. They'll get much better at verifying information and like turning on deep research.
I don't know if they'll get better at verifying information because humans aren't that good at verifying information.
Well, turning on deep research does help, but like then the inference costs go up and not everyone has access to that, right? But let's just push that aside. Do you think in the trends you're seeing that AI search will replace traditional search in the next 5 years?
Isn't it already slated? I mean, last time I chatted with like friends at Google, they're like, your Google search bar will be no more.
Oh, I'm sure Google is quaking in their toes.
Yeah, I'm
like they're killing the golden goose.
100%. Well, they're worried. They don't want to kill the golden goose.
Oh, no, but that's the thing. As I always say, like, as much as Google has all these other things like Waymo and everything else, like Google is still 5 links to the top of a search page. That's you look at the revenue of Google, it's like 98% search volume. I don't even care about.
I think like that's kind of over and done, and then I think we're moving.
Yeah. So you're saying, Jules, you do believe that it will, right? So you believe that AI search will replace it? Okay.
Oh yeah. I mean, my God. I mean, you guys are younger than me, but I mean, did you do your research paper and have to look through the card catalog? I mean, we were looking on like crap, online internet tools, that were horrible in uni, like to just put together a basic research paper. They're long gone, right?
Yeah.
So it's just moving down the road that it needs to move down, which is like we already know what we want. We already know what we like to use every day. We're quite habitual, and we just need to be able to access the things that we want to do.
Yeah.
I think where the problem's going to come is the discovery portion. Like it's going to be, what do you discover that's new? What do you discover that's outside your box, right?
Well, I think the interesting question is the discovery, but the behavior for it, right?
Yeah.
Because like whenever you use an LM, it's not really like searching the web. It's like a computation, right? It's doing
correct.
It's generating new tokens around a topic, and it's doing a whole bunch of things. And the prompt can be massaged and engineered and gives you better results, and we're still figuring out all that stuff. But like I find it really interesting because it's not simply a search, whereas search is very, very fast. And I think I always wonder, should Google be worried about AI search? Do you think this is the thing that will topple their crown? Is if you have to make a prediction in 5 years, do you think?
Well, at the end of the day, is a big ad network. Right, we always forget that. Like at the end of the day, it's a ginormous ad network.
Yeah.
And right now, it needs to motivate. It needs to stop being lazy. It needs to stop thinking that SEO and search terms keywords are going to bring it home. And it needs to start going, okay, great. What do we know about businesses? What do we know that we need to do in order to put them at the top of the pile? Right?
True.
I mean, they're making us.
Although I'm not sure that.
Really, I mean, we're making them rich and comfortable and cozy, and
we're doing making them rich and comfortable and cozy.
Well, I mean, wasn't that the trope on any Google engineer?
Yeah, but I mean,
do they do any work?
Do they do any work really? Like, it is kind of
nice.
like, right? The lunch is good, but it's at the same time, like we as the consumer are providing them with so much already, right? Like they could make our lives so much better. So quickly, right?
Yeah. How should founders like think about LLM traffic, AI search? And what should they do for their products to cater for it?
Oh no, that's a very specialized bit of internet knowledge.
Well,
Why?
come on, Hugh. Come on, Hugh. You're already seeing the
But
results
even
of it
the
with your product.
even the crazy hacky AI, even the crazy hacky SEO people, even like the sort of let's call them the grey
Neil
hat,
Patel.
the grey
Oh,
hat.
Neil
Yeah,
Patel.
I mean, Neil Patel's a bit
Yeah.
old school these days, Jules.
Yeah.
But I mean, the simple answer is the standard answer, like the kind of marketing 101 answer, which is put out good content. Put out good content that is interesting and relates to what people want to find. Like the best XYZ tools of 2025 and all that stuff still works. Because the LLMs, when someone puts in the box of the LLM, tell me the best fucking tennis racket, your blog post about best tennis rackets for people in 2025 ends up getting shown up.
Okay, so I have this litmus test in my lifetime. I love ad networks. I love advertising. It's like a weird, like, secret, hardcore passion of mine. I worked at Blue Lithium, which was one of the first ad networks that did like pixel packs. They did socialmedia.com, which we ran all the inventory on Facebook, whatever. Like, I live for this. And my big thing is like, when it can tell me and give me options for stuff that I do every day in a habit-based way, we will have hit trifecta. That is when you unlock everything. And I think we're so close, right? And in my lifetime, like since I was like 25, 26, I'm like, in my lifetime, I just want to see that happen. I just want that to become real.
Invest in the product, that
Like
company that makes
if that
Maybe we will.
becomes real. But
Although-
it's like what Hugh said, you're in the content game where you've got to like knock yourself out, get to the top. And then there's another side of it, which is the consumer side, which is why am I on Amazon searching for shit? Like seriously? Like you already know what I'm going to buy. No, I don't want to sign up for a subscription. You kind of already know what I want
But
to
you can save 16% by signing up for a subscription today when you buy your pet food, Jules.
I know.
Don't you love that prompt? And every single time it's pre-selected,
I know.
and you always forget to occasionally click no, buy it only once.
So been there.
No, I don't need a
how-
subscription to Computer Mice. I need
How
one.
else will Jeff pay for the wedding in Venice?
Oh, the wedding in Venice is off. I saw today.
I
The wedding,
know,
the
I
wedding in
heard.
Venice is off.
Apparently
yeah.
they have had
Classically.
it, like done. They're like
Just
no,
such a
don't
beautiful,
come.
classically Italian move of being like, rich person's coming to our city for a wedding, so we're going to throw crocodiles in the canals to stop the guests from being able to arrive in
I know,
expensive
I know.
like boats.
There's something poetic about this. I'm not sure what
It's
it is. I
It's
should
so
ask
deeply
ChatGPT.
Italian. It's almost
It's
like,
so
oh,
deeply Italian.
we'll strip the place of coffee. Like
But I think there's something in this. There's
something in this.
There's something in this. And I don't know
Quite
what
that.
form. I don't know what form it comes in. I don't know if it's a text message format or a voice format or it's a search bar format.
Or a badge that you wear that records everything that you say throughout the day, Jules.
But fuck no. But I just think and I think when it comes though, I really feel like this is going to sound so trite and like stupid, but I really think women are going to be the biggest benefiters of it.
That probably is a good call. It probably is a
Like,
good call
I
of
just think
because let's be honest, the most
day-to-day-
valuable
Interesting.
advertising market is
Right?
household mums, right? They're
I think
by
it's
far the most
really-
highest value advertising market.
I mean,
And so
I didn't
if
know
you,
that.
by far, because they buy all of the like the grocery shop and everything. Like they decide what nappies to buy and all that.
True.
Like, the
Every
household
true.
buyer
You
has
can
been
switch brands.
always.
The other thing, like Procter and Gamble is genius, man. Like, but you don't quite switch brands. Once you're locked, you're kind of like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm just done, right? I can't
The
be
last thing you want to do is
bothered.
buy a new set of nappies, and then they give the baby nappy rash. And
Well,
then
you
you've
know-
got,
you know that's
40
one of the
nappies you don't
ways
wanna do with.
Coles
I
and
know this,
Woolies-
Jules, right? I know this.
You know-
I don't
you
have
know
a
one of the
child,
ways
I'll admit,
Coles
but I
and
know that
Woolies-
this is a thing in advertising.
Heartfelt, true. But then the thing that I question is our discovery for new products, right? So
Yeah, and it's,
at the moment you've got your Instagram with your reels and your clothing and but it's all starting to look very the same because the algorithm will just make it all look the same because they're like, oh, they've personified you, right? And then you're stuck there kind of, right? And then the other thing that I was thinking about today, I'm like, why am I clicking on whatever influencer to get to Linktree to then go find whatever and then but you could just come to Linktree. Nobody's going to search through Linktree. I mean, I don't know, maybe they do, but
No,
I'm not
probably
going to do that.
No.
That's hours that I don't have, right? I'm time poor with a
I want to be told which nappies to buy in between the cat videos that I
Right.
watch while I'm waiting for my child to finish getting on the toilet.
I mean, there's something.
Influence me.
Yeah, right. There's it become it. So
Well, it will
there's
just
like,
know what you're doing here because it's aware, right? Because you're wearing your pendant and it'll just
Correct.
know.
I think this is where your voice.
Designed by Johnny Ives, you
We
know.
had pieces of this, right? We had the Alexa.
Yeah,
We had
100%.
Alexa that was going to make your grocery list. That never ever came to be. We had those buttons that Amazon.
I always loved the
You could
buttons.
just push the button, and it was
Yeah,
going to
I just don't
magically
trust the result.
come.
I
That
do like
never
the
really,
buttons.
right? But that never really came together. And we've had all these stop starts of stuff, and I just feel like maybe we might potentially be there. You
No,
know?
no, I
Maybe.
agree. It's a really interesting question, Jules. I think actually that's a very interesting insight and something well worth thinking about for founders is that piece of what is the future way in the world of LLMs that a product company is going to get in front of mums wanting to decide what to buy. It's actually a really interesting because, like that is so much of the advertising market. It's not funny. And there is so much money that flows into that world that it's a very interesting question. And mums are indeed always time poor. Anything that saves a mum time, always a good, always a good win.
We're happy, you know.
Speaking of wins, moving on to topic 3.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
I need one of those
Recently-
soundboards so I can do.
I know. I'm just like
No one's stopping you here. No one's stopping you. You can get
Well,
one.
the answer to something is, do I really need a soundboard?
Yeah,
That's what's stopping me.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Every call with a founder. Pew, pew, pew.
Oh, that'd be really fun, actually.
we're so good.
You have a
Moving on
trapdoor
to
noise when the call finishes.
That's right. Yeah. Moving on to topic 3.
Well,
Speaking of wins, OpenAI recently lost against New York Times, who's now have a court order retention to preserve all ChatGPT user logs, including deleted chats and sensitive chats logged through its API offering, which obviously impacts every product that uses
Everyone,
ChatGPT.
yeah, and everyone that's claimed, oh yeah, OpenAI will never see your data,
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
After the news organization claimed that the AI company is destroying evidence in their copyright lawsuit, which I think is really ironic that the New York Times, which has written about tech privacy, is now forcing a tech company to ignore tech privacy.
These things are always that way. Come on,
know,
lawyers live
but
in a
it's
different
still
world to everyone
hilarious.
else in the world.
It's still hilarious. I guess my question for you, Hugh and Jules, on this is what do you take away from this, and what should builders take away? What should founders take away from this building products in the space? Because the ChatGPT rappers, as pundits like to say, which we don't like that term, is obviously using using ChatGPT is a very important thing. But yeah, what should founders take away from this?
I think it's a really interesting. I mean, I think it's less founders, right? I think this is the kind of thing that founders can't really do a lot about. Like, you kind of,
Sure.
you just got to go with the punches. So I think from a founder lens, you're kind of like, what am I going to do?
Whatever
Like,
everyone else
this
is
is kind
we'll
of
do
big
that.
company arguing big company problem. It's like when US East 1 goes down in AWS, an early stage company, you're kind of like, oh, look, half the internet is gone.
Sure.
So it's okay. I can just also have an outage. And I remember actually the day when that happened and I remember a customer ticket being like, oh, yes, I noticed I couldn't log into Netflix and, I figured maybe it was the same. And it's, yes, if Netflix doesn't work, neither can we. And so I think for a founder lens, it's probably not that, there's an interesting question there of what do you do and what does this mean in terms of, the promises that I make as a founder, right? If I'm making a promise as a founder saying, oh, yes, your data will, the data, the data privacy aspect, which a lot of particularly B2B and a lot of enterprise in particular, they do get pretty sensitive about what data is retained. How is that retained? How is that used? And the
100%.
classic being every AI solution now has the classic like, oh, none of your data is used for training. They have no idea if that data is used for training or not. Founders don't know the answer to that. Come on, they don't know the answer to that.
All right, you ready for my big blowout? I think data's over. So my big blowout.
Data is over.
Well,
That's another great quote from this episode, Jules. We're gonna have to like.
so
Data is over. Unpack
I think it's
that for me.
over.
Yeah.
I think I desire to have it. I desire to believe in it, and I think I desire that it exists for our failures or to hold people to account or whatever data is used for. Right? I think it's at its end. I think what now you're going to have is everybody is kind of going to move back. I mean, this was the whole identity piece that we've all talked about, right, forever. And I think it's going to move back into, it's much more about a log. I don't know how to explain that. It's not data or a data set, but it's rather a log of information. and that log of information will be your kind of like log of information. And
You
how
you mean like people will start to get ownership of their data or log of information in
yeah,
your
but I
sort of
think
works?
data as we understand it today is, I think that's fully cached. I
Yeah,
think
probably because I guess what is data when you have AI that can process it? Like what
why
what is it?
why anymore, right? What is it like?
Yeah, I mean, it's a
I mean,
question. Like,
Structured versus unstructured data. I mean, it's
yeah,
still data.
yeah. But
I think the more
I
interesting thing
think
for me, the
that
lesson of this is it's such uncharted waters, and part of the problem here is like the NYT is presumably I don't obviously I don't know the actual thesis of what's going on here, but they're presumably trying to like work out how they establish damages. So like if
That's
if
right.
if, if the
yeah.
New York
Like,
Times
wait a
has
minute.
appeared
Like you hold
55
data
million
to hold
times.
someone to account, right? And I think, but we're gonna move. We have to move beyond that. And it has to be. It has to become like your information logs, right? Your searches, your
Well,
whatever.
I mean, I think the other question
All that you
here though
do.
is
the
what
real question here is copyright, which is
yeah,
what
what is the
copyright
value
is.
of something that you've published to the public? Like there's
Yeah.
a valid question of, oh look, if it's the NYT behind a paywall, blah blah, you've got to be a subscriber, or the same thing as like the arguments of Encyclopedia Britannica, all kind of stuff. If it's behind a pay, there's been US things about this of all kinds, but if it's behind a paywall, what does that mean? But if given we had the same argument about the Digital Media Act in Australia, right? Of what is the actual rights or obligations of a media company when they seek as much as they can to have that access, and yet if it's someone else monetizing it, they then want to be able to obviously capture some of that. And fair enough to them, like they've obviously created it, but it's kind of hard to have that balance of we've made it public, but also you can't monetize it.
So I think those are two different. I think you're talking about work product, right? Which is like a bespoke work product. And then you're
Yeah.
talking about how did you interact or interface with that bespoke work product. That's very different to like my data and information and how much, what did I log into? That's,
I mean, I agree. And I think there's a separate question here of just like who then owns that data. Like it's one thing for you to what happens when and there's within my world, like what happens when let's say we're Galileo, right, and we're like, hey, I want to do an analysis of Galileo's blog posts, right, and then ChatGPT crawls the Galileo site and then generates me a nice report about that, and then I go, oh, okay, cool, this is some information about the blog post that we've written. And when I then go, oh, actually, I want that to see how that changes compared to Sequoia's blog posts. And I say, oh, ChatGPT, can you go and have a look at Sequoia's blog posts, right? Now, is that allowed? Are we breaching copyright by asking ChatGPT to do an analysis and to crawl, And what's the difference if we're doing it because asked it to do it on my website compared to Sequoia's?
Yeah, well, I mean, the precedent here is in music and how you remix music.
Correct,
as well,
yeah.
which is a much better. That's been argued a lot, but even today, there's the new argument is who owns the output of these remixes and how much should it be remixed? Like, to what extent is it remixed? If you just replicate the image, you try to replicate the image, is that allowed? Or is that a breach of copyright because you are basically creating a copy, but you're just telling the LLM to create a copy? And so I think that's kind of this it's tweaking at the edges, but I think this case was a bit premature for the New York Times, right? Because they jumped out the gun. They're the first ones to do this case against OpenAI. I think
Premature, like it was always going to happen.
yeah, but
yeah.
I mean, these are the early protectionary measures that everybody takes.
Interestingly, speaking about another Aussie in this space, Lachlan Murdoch, our favorite news entrepreneurs.
Another unknown Aussie in the States. Lachlan Murdoch.
He went the other way. So rather than sue OpenAI, which is what they did at news many years ago when the internet became a thing, they decided to partner with them, right? And so they went the other way. And it'll be interesting to see, how this all plays out and whether it benefits them in the long term or makes no difference. Who knows? But those are the two directions people are taking it. And so I think in some ways it's inevitable. Someone would have sued them, right? And there'll be more cases to be had.
This whole issue of copyright's going to happen. I mean, this still hasn't been solved in the world of social networks, right? And that's not a new market either. So
I mean, we had Creative Commons license. I mean, we've been through it all, man.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Getty Images was the stock standard.
Well, I think the interesting thing for me, for builders, what I took away from this a little bit was, do you always build in an open source model alternative
100%.
so that you just have that? Because can you ever really rely on a private model to do everything you need it to do? Or do you always have, does this become like a thesis of every product? I don't know.
I'm
You
gonna
know.
go with yes. Like you look at everything that was early days successful, it all followed that kind of model, right? Facebook would never have gotten to be what Facebook was in terms of advertising and social behavior if they hadn't figured out, oh, we're gonna have a platform and we're gonna have, everybody come build on our platform kind of thing, right?
I mean, that's the hard thing. It's the same thing though of and I think the challenge I think in the market is also that piece of just, well, what do you do? It's one thing that you sort of don't worry about it until you get big enough that then suddenly you're OpenAI size, right? And that's but you saw the same thing with Spotify, right? Spotify was really early to that whole music streaming market and kind of started. I mean, I remember someone writing the piece of how the like early Spotify app used to just like stream YouTube videos in the background, and then subsequently did some like real life torrenting stuff and things like that. Like it, did some things that you would look at and you go, oh my god, you can't believe you do that, And you think that when they're the size of Spotify, but they obviously did the sort of ask forgiveness, not permission mindset, for better or worse. And you saw the same thing, you're seeing the same thing with many of the AI companies, really, in how they've been approaching their corpus.
Yeah, that's true.
In a gold rush race the way it is. Like,
this was kind of my thinking today when I was like, okay, well, it was a conversation that I had dinner at a friend's house and they exited to a particular company. And anyway, they had a product that they had worked on for a long time. And they were like, Jules, you're pitching our product back to me. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I know. Anyway, but it's the idea that each one of us are going to have our own kind of corpus in a way. Right?
I think so. I think so. That touches on the idea of longitudinal memory, which is really, really interesting because we don't really know how to structure it yet.
Yeah,
well,
we
don't know.
We move
That's
through
right.
Next phase.
That's right. And for the super nerds out there, Jan LeCun just published a paper on how they embed tokens in the training, and so you have better contextual memory in the model rather than trying to RAG. This is a very bastardized summary of the paper, but it's nonetheless like my point I'm making is it's very open and we don't know yet, and I think it's very interesting. I've also heard that LLMs, if you ask them to come up with longitudinal memory, sometimes they make up some very weird, interesting things to do it, and it's like very unclear what they're doing. But it's an open topic, and I think it's really interesting. But yeah, there you go, Jules. That's interesting. I thought you've.
Yeah, I have my own kind of like corpus of all my data over all my years, all my things, and I'm going to allow access or not allow access, right?
Yeah. There is I think it's called Second Self or something. There's an open source initiative to create an AI clone of yourself, which has come out. Very cool. If any listeners have used this or tried it, would love to hear from you. I'm bringing it up now because one of our LPs in the fund is doing this exact process and creating a second version of himself in AI. So maybe we should bring him on the pod and ask him how it's going. But there's a very early community doing this already. Moving on to the fourth topic, which we'll try and sneak in very quickly. Hugh, do you want to introduce the fourth topic?
Yeah, so I guess the big asterisk news is that Canva bought a local Sydney-based AI company called Magic Brief. Magic Brief was one of the solutions that helped with the creative workflow of ads on particularly social media. But obviously, we've seen a lot of those things of where, you can see the ad library of your competitors, and then you can look at what's succeeding on, Allbirds or whatever, and then you can decide what you want to do for your shoe brand. So one of those solutions, they bought it for reportedly 10 plus million. The number hasn't been defined beyond being greater than that. And, the Financial Review, I'm sure James put in the show notes, was reporting that sort of is looking ahead for the Canva IPO, which I feel like is a bit sort of the boy who cried wolf here. There's been the Canva IPO 6 months away for the last 3 years.
Oh, they're selling
correct.
Correct. They're already selling down. Everyone who wants to.
Another set of series I heard.
Yeah.
And so, I think, I guess the question there is to then say, well, what does that mean?
It's a sign of the ecosystem maturing. right? So you've got where unicorns, they're becoming far more active in M&A. This is something that should have happened 5-10 years ago, but we just didn't really have the scale. And I think it is a signal towards IPO because clearly as you get to IPO, you bolster a bunch of things that you need to bolster and you buy, this is obviously not adding revenue, but it's adding functionality, I presume, that they otherwise would have had to build out for the next, year and a half. So I think it's a very positive signal to me. And I hope to see more acquisitions from our big tech unicorns and companies in Australia locally. More M&A activity I hope to happen in the coming months, in my view.
I just don't know where you're going to IPO these days.
Well, I mean, that's the problem with investment bankers, Jules. With the utmost respect.
I mean, NASDAQ, okay, London.
The ASX.
I would be astonished, Jules, if the most recent investors don't have a series of clauses to define that answer. That will probably not be the ASX. And I think the dream of having Canva on the ASX, I mean, I guess they could do a dual listing, but like the dream of having Canva on the ASX, I think is a bit of a pipe dream.
It's written, they get
100%. No, they're going to do New York Stock Exchange, I presume.
But I mean, if you can just go ahead and keep pulling small amounts of secondaries,
if you can keep everyone happy just selling secondaries, then the question is there any incentive? And that
really
is what they're thinking.
I don't know. This becomes
I have a thesis.
Question. Like, what does it mean to go public these days?
Correct,
Ooh,
right?
Good question.
And when the ASX is fantastic for mid to small cap listings. In AI, there's going to be so many small cap companies that I just wonder whether, we just see this flourishing of small cap listings on the ASX. I'm not too sure if the ASX wants this. I'm not saying, this is not investment advice, but I do wonder whether you'll have, maybe it's not the ASX, but whether, because you can't list on the NASDAQ as a small cap, right? It's just very difficult.
I think if we don't want to have a painful 2026, we need to seriously question private equity's influence in our life. And I think on top of that, if we want to return...
Are you saying it's good or bad, or you're being...
I'm saying I think painful. So painful can be good for some and painful can be awful for others, right?
Interesting.
Depends on where you're sitting. So I think we have a very painful 2026 ahead of us if, we don't start to understand how to utilize and also, push back private equity and figure out what is its place and how do we still create a strong public offering.
Interesting. Well, private markets are definitely
the new public markets.
The new public markets, right? Which is a very worrying trend for some regulators and a great trend for some investors, but equally is an asset class most can't access very well. So
the good parts, I think, is the
correct.
Yeah. You can get them on the ASX already.
I think it's more a deeper understanding of what is private equity. Like capital is capital, but not all capital is created equal, right?
No.
I think Obama, he had this speech recently and he said it really well and I really liked it. It was like, democracy is democracy as long as you have all of these other components. That's what, this work is democracy, right? And I think we have to understand like capitalism and fair markets and they require like daily work of all the components. And when you end up with one that has a much stronger position than others, you have to understand that you're no longer sitting in a fair market necessarily.
Correct. That's right. Yeah.
There's always a bad hangover in those cases. It's, you go out, you drink too much champagne, you sit in the sun. Your next morning isn't very fun, right? So.
Got to drink better champagne, Jules.
Oh, babes. That's right.
Thanks all for listening to another episode of the Galileo Ventures podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Please share it with someone, a founder or investor, if you think they would like what we talked about. And finally, do subscribe on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube and give us a rating. We will be back with season 3, and we have a lot of very exciting things planned, and we can't wait to be back. Thanks for listening.